Good morning, this is Matthias at Carolina Raptor Center. Today we're talking about migration on avian adventures. So migration, specifically hawk migration, is pretty exciting. If you never experienced it, we'll talk about where you can go right here locally somewhere. So migration happens literally worldwide. It's not just limited to birds, of course. Mammals, some mammals migrate. There are famous migrations in Africa, for instance. But we're going to focus on raptors today, for the most part. This is kind of what you might see if you're at the right time, at the right place. Lots of hawks migrating. So why... Hello? Hey. Oh, let's try this one. So if you've never experienced it, I would encourage you to try it somewhere locally. One good spot is literally 2 hours from here near Sparta, North Carolina, an overlook on the Blue Ridge Parkway. Just pull over, pull up your lawn chair, find your binoculars, and there you go. If you're there on the right day, you could see hundreds, maybe even thousands of hawks. A much more famous place is Hawk Mountain, Pennsylvania. They've been doing hawk watches there for 90 years, I believe now, somewhere in that range. The longest site, active site. So I'd encourage you to experience it at least once to appreciate what it's all about. So why do raptors migrate? Basically it means you need to follow your food source. If you think about birds further north, Canada, the northeastern US, those birds can have a harder time finding food in the wintertime. A, because food is hiding under snow, and B, because there's less food. Some food sources migrate away. Well, there's just simply fewer of them during the winter months. All the young have dispersed. So you can not only need to go where the food is, but also you can avoid the coldest temperature where you need a lot more calories to stay warm. So the food is typically the reason why a lot of animals migrate. So where do they go? Well, in the northern hemisphere, of course, they go south for the winter. And south can be relative. That could be as far south as southern Canada. It could be the United States. It could be Central and South America in some extreme cases, or in the most extreme case, here's the one I found that is maybe setting the records. The Arctic tern, obviously not a raptor, but a seabird, literally travels more than 22,000 miles every year, going from its breeding grounds in the Arctic to the summers in the Antarctica. Can't imagine what the summer in the Antarctic is like, but it must be better than the winter in the Arctic. So that's an extreme case. In our case here in the Carolinas, we see birds coming from Canada and the northeastern US, we believe, based on banding records. Birds typically follow certain flyways. Here are the common ones illustrated on this diagram. And they often follow certain landmarks such as coastlines or mountain ranges or a major river right here. Easy landmarks that birds can follow. We'll talk about how they find their way in a minute anyway. But there are certain very well recognized pathways that certain birds take, and this includes raptors as well. There is sort of a minor route that goes along the coastline that some raptors follow. So it's not all over, not all, just in the central areas. So here to talk about some really crazy things happening, how they find their way. The obvious ones are visual cues. They're looking for things. Obviously, the raptors have great eyesight. They can follow things like the sun, where the sun rises and sets, and the movement of the sun that give them an idea of which direction they need to go. They follow those mountains, rivers, coastlines. At night, some birds will follow the stars. Not necessarily an individual star, but they take advantage of the fact that stars rotate around a certain spot, say the North Star, and that rotation gives them an indication of which way they should go. Birds have been shown to use the magnetic fields of the Earth to orient themselves. So within the retina of the eye, there are certain cells called cones, and a certain type of cone has a protein in it that allows them to literally see the magnetic fields. Like you and I see, well, an object in front of us, they can see it flying. So seeing that field allows them to, again, orient, in this case, going south, which is just amazing. The patterns of wind will help, and that's probably related to the geography, mountain ranges, how the winds flow across the country. In some cases, they learn a pattern. It may be because they've followed someone else, or over time they've tried different routes. For instance, there's a website I looked up for Dr. Rob Beauregard, who's been following ospreys for many years with satellite telemetry. And there was a particular osprey that learned to get a better route every year. You could see progress year after year. The first time it went a long ways over water, which they try to avoid. And by the third or fourth migration, it actually had learned, if I just hug the coastline, it is a little bit longer ways, but it's easier to migrate that way. For instance, you can stop. If you're over water, like the ocean, there's no place to stop in most cases. A lot of this is instinctual. Birds know exactly where they need to go, having never been shown, not having followed anyone else. You can displace them, and there have been experiments done with this, displace young birds to a different habitat, different area altogether, and they still find their same place in the end as their siblings might. Depending on where you are, there are going to be certain migration peaks. So here is for Hawk Mountain. I borrowed this. Hawk Mountain, Pennsylvania, again, because it's one of the most famous ones. They've got the most records of anybody going back so many years. So you notice most migrations start somewhere around early August, but it varies with the species. And in some cases, it's a very long period. Like harriers start in August, don't finish till December, whereas a broad-winged hawk migration is very concentrated. We know this from local sightings around here. So in Pennsylvania, they literally start at the very end of August, and they're pretty much done by the end of September. Within a month, almost all of them broadwinged hawks head south. Around here in the Carolinas, right around the third or fourth week of September is when we see the peak typically. So migration, varies with species and with location. So of course, the further south you are, the later all this would happen to some extent. Come on. So what do birds do to get ready for migration? So sometimes you can tell they get a bit antsy, speaking of for captive birds. They know they're supposed to be going somewhere. They do a lot more wing flapping, but the big thing is they need to get ready for that long flight, because in some cases they do not eat during their migration, which could take days or weeks, of course. So they build up body fat reserves to help them make those long flights, especially if they're going to be over water. Literally, there's a record of an osprey flying for over 50 hours over water. It would be hard to stop in the middle of the ocean to find food. Yes, an osprey potentially could catch food, but how is he going to eat it? He doesn't eat like some birds do with in flight. So they have to be ready for this long trip. And sometimes when they get wherever they're going, they end up being very emaciated. No surprise there. So here's a red-tailed hawk, just had a big meal. Notice this bulge. That is his crop, his or her crop. Somebody's ready for migration. As you're migrating, you have to think about conserving energy. Of course, they don't actively think about this. That's something we do. But they instinctively follow certain paths because they need to save the energy to get there on time and without losing too much weight. So birds, in many cases, follow mountain ranges because they can save energy that way very easily. For two reasons. One, if you think about birds coming from the north, they hit the Appalachian Mountains. Any wind that comes down from the west or the north is going to hit those mountains and curve upward. It has to move up to get out of the way. That gives birds an easy way to follow those updrafts, save energy, and simply glide rather than flap their wings. The other thing that happens really anywhere, but especially along these mountain ranges, is during the heat of the day, when the sun warms up the ground and the air, you have updrafts forming, columns of air. And birds will take advantage of those and start rising within those columns. Again, just gliding till they reach a certain height, and then they glide down, find the next thermal, go back up, find the next thermal. So they're kind of stair-stepping their way all the way down the Appalachian Mountains as far as they need to go. Let's see, so here's the ultimate goal. If you can be on a day like that day, that would be great. You can literally see thousands of hawks in one day easily. But how the heck would you count that? And this is, by the way, it's called a kettle. So a kettle of hawks, that's a group of hawks, could be different species, same species, circling together in one of those air columns, trying to take advantage of that air mass rising and saving energy. So a huge swirling mass of hawks going up and up and up until they peel out and go to the next air column. So how do you count these? A couple different ways. It will be hard to count those individually because they're all moving. But if it's a small enough group, you literally just count them as they come across a certain plane. You can get pretty good with experience with estimating group sizes. In some cases, for the better known places, they can use radar because they might catch birds that are way above your field of view. They're so far up high that you can't even see them with binoculars, but they can see them. This is on Lake Erie, and these are literally the reflections off of birds as they're migrating along the edge of the lake. Again, they're trying to avoid water, so they're going to skim the edge, and in this case this was a northward migration, springtime migration. So radar works, or literally taking images like the one we just showed a minute ago, and then you count them at the end of the day and try to make sure you don't overlap images, so you get as good an estimate as you can. There's literally no way to count them, extremely accurately because there are just too many birds and you're dealing with such a huge mass of hawks. You count your results, so there are well over 1,000 hawk watch sites in the US alone that all work together to collect data to give us an idea of how the populations are doing. So here's Mojave Rock up near Sparta on the Blue Ridge Parkway, and there's last year's a total, I don't know which day it was for, but notice broad-winged hawks are the big ones, and that's pretty much common for that area. But you see a little bit of everything else. We'll talk about species in a minute, different species. Oh, here it is. So you could see quite a few different hawks. It just depends on the weather, the season, and the luck that day. Cooper's hawks, sharp-shinned hawks, which you notice look very similar. The big difference is how squared off the tail is versus round. Sharpie is a square tail. Cooper's is round. You could see the group of hawks called vireos, or broad-winged hawks, which is the broad-winged hawk, red-shouldered hawk, red-tailed hawk. So these are all common birds you see around here anyway. They're native to this area, and our birds, by the way, don't have to migrate because it doesn't get that harsh during the winter months. So these birds you're seeing are pretty much always going to be birds from the north coming through here on their way south or to stop here in the Carolinas. You can see falcons like the kestrel, the merlin, or the peregrine. You can see the eagles, of course, which is always a highlight. Bald and golden eagles, both, although they would be fairly rare in terms of numbers, but you can see them. You can see both types of vultures, black and turkey vultures. And then finally a few other ones. There's a harrier, which is a kind of a rare bird around here. It's nice to see them, and the ospreys, of course. So quite a variety. But the nice pictures I'm showing you is not exactly what you're going to see, because again, you're seeing birds way up in the sky. Even with binoculars, sometimes they're going to be no bigger than that. So you have to learn a different way of identifying birds. Not like you're a bird watcher walking down the trail, you see a hawk perched in a tree 100 feet away. That's not how you're going to recognize them. The colors don't necessarily mean anything anymore. It's more about the outline, how they're flying. You're not going to hear them because they're not going to vocalize. So you have to learn different skill sets in order to identify them. But it's kind of fun and a bit of a challenge, but you get better as you practice. And how do we know where they're going? Well, it's because of people who are doing research for decades now on birds. Here's the National Association, Hawk Migration Association. People have banded birds, published data. Here's the old-fashioned leg band that's still being used, of course, because it's a cheap way of identifying an individual bird. But the only way it's going to get reported is if somebody literally finds this bird, gets their hand on, or if they're very lucky, get binoculars on a bird that's, say, perching somewhere, and they can read the entire number and report it to a website. More advanced and much more fun, because you get a lot more data out of it, but also more costly, is putting transmitters on birds. Anything from a simple radio transmitter that you need an antenna to follow, to a satellite transmitter with a solar panel that gives you all kinds of cool information, such as our friend Freedom, who left here back about 4 years ago. There he is, as a young eagle. He's wearing one of those backpacks. Here's the same bird 4 years ago, still has his backpack. Whoops. Oh, go back. 4 years later, still has his backpack, and this is the kind of data you collect. This is a 4-day summary, going about 500 miles in 4 days, and every single one of these purple dots is a location that tells you where exactly this bird was at that point. So you get a lot more useful information about where they're going, what they're doing, whether they're perching or flying potentially. Hawk watching, so in North Carolina there are lots of choices. The list is much longer than this, but some of the common ones are Pilot Mountain, Grandfather Mountain, Mount Mitchell, and even us towards the coast. You might see other birds as well. Of course, this is not just raptors. Lake Mattamuskeet is a stopover place for lots of waterfowl. And you start out early, so you get a good head start. Train them young. And finally, the bucket list. So if you really want to go big time, this is where you want to go. So remember all those flyways across the U.S. Well, most of them concentrate in one place, well, in several places, but one of the best places in the world to see hawk migration is Veracruz, Mexico. It's called the River of Raptors, because on the average day you'll see at least 100,000 birds. On a big day you'll see 500,000 hawks, eagles, vultures come by, which would be unbelievable. So that's the place where a large portion of the entire population of hawks comes through on their way south to Central or South America. So if I had lots of money and some time, that's where I would go. Spend a week in Veracruz, Mexico. And I believe that's the end of my show. Hope you enjoyed it. Send us questions if you have any. And thanks for watching.